So the title of this session was Cleaning Up the Boys Club.
Yes.
You were brought in as Dara's first hire when he took over Uber. What was the company like when you arrived?
It was a hot mess. I mean, to use a legal term. Look, I was not looking for this job when I took it.
You had only been at Pepsi for a couple years.
I had been at PepsiCo. I was the general counsel of Pepsi for 3 years. Everything was going fine. In fact, true story, in the spring of 17, I had been meeting with one of my lawyers in my office, and after the meeting, we're just kind of looking at the New York Times. Actually, it was the New York Times. And it was a big story on Uber, you know, the Susan Fowler blog and the Delete Uber and all of these things. And I finished kind of reading the story, and I say to my colleague, man, I'm glad I'm not the GC of that company. They got some problems. And then, yeah. Well,
fast forward a couple months.
Fast forward a few months.
What does a hot mess really look like, though?
A hot mess, well, the thing about Uber is it's an incredible company. I mean, it really is an amazing company. It's a verb, right? I mean, when you have a brand that is a verb, that is amazing. So you have this incredible platform, which means it has incredible impact around the world. And yet, there were so many systems, there were so many aspects to the culture that had not matured to fit the profile that the company had, right? And so that meant that there was a bro culture. That meant that there, was sexual harassment and other things like that. That meant that there were, frankly, systems that just hadn't been developed because we had over-indexed on growth and had sort of forgotten some of the important cultural values that you've got to have in order to be a strong, sustainable, great company.
So how do you go about fixing it? Because one easy answer is to fire all the bad actors. But that's not easy.
That's not easy to do. I think first you got to, whenever you go into any organization, I heard Z say this, I think is absolutely right, you've got to actually listen. You've got to understand what you're dealing with, and that's what I did when I first came in. I really kind of trying to understand the organization and understand that there is a great deal of talent there, as there was on my team, but also be able to recognize, where you needed to make significant changes. What I found is that there was a real hunger for change. That people were really eager to have very clear direction, very clear principles to sort of guide their everyday. And so our cultural norm, which is really our North Star, is do the right thing, period. It's something that I felt very comfortable with coming from the Justice Department, where it was the same. And what I did after really kind of understanding the organization is I started to make some significant changes. And so, it's one thing to say, we care about diversity and inclusion, do the right thing, period. But then you really have to show people that you're serious about that. And you show them through very specific actions, which is what I did.
Yeah, for example, I mean, how do you actually take someone who was maybe misbehaving, was maybe exhibiting these bro traits, whatever those might be, and get that same individual to still contribute to the company without causing some of that excessive harm that maybe was coming out of the way they were acting before?
Right, I think there's some of that, but I think the way you gain the credibility of people is by making sure that in the actions you're taking, they see that you're serious. So for instance, a couple of examples. One is, everybody probably has heard about the Holder Report. This is the report that Eric Holder did on the company before I got there, before Dara got there, which really did a deep dive on the cultural problems that the company had, as well as some of the governance challenges that the company had, some serious issues there. And just like when Dara hired me, it sent a message because I'd been at the Justice Department, I'd been at a world-class public company. I did the same thing with my first hire. I hired the author of the Holder Report to be my partner, my number 2 at Uber. And she is a brilliant lawyer. And she has helped me to transform that entire part of Uber and that team. And so, by actions, I think you really show. I mean, another example, if you just give me this minute to talk about how we handled the accident involving our self-driving vehicle last year in Tempe, Arizona, which tragically killed Ms. Hertzberg, a pedestrian. you know, a lot of companies, and as the chief legal officer, I can completely understand that, a lot of companies would do the top to bottom safety review that we did. But most of them would shroud that under attorney-client privilege, naturally, and then try to learn lessons from their in-depth report. We made the decision within 48 hours that we weren't going to do that. And so we not only hired an independent person to come in with a team to do that top to bottom safety review, Christopher Hart, former NTSB chairman, but we put all of that out once it was done. You can find it right now on the internet. We published it because we knew that that was such an important safety moment for the entire self-driving industry because it was so nascent that how we reacted to that would actually set a precedent. And so again, showing people externally and internally that you really are willing to live by your values even when it's hard, that's how you get, I think, that's how you get the credibility.
Uber's an unusual company though, because you've got your corporate employees, but then you've got your drivers.
Yes.
And one thing that you've been focused on is this transparency report that you say is coming out later this year. This is a transparency report that looks at the safety of the actual rides that millions and millions of people are taking. Now, you've been listening to customer service calls as part of this report, including one in which an Uber driver said that he had raped a passenger.
Right.
This must have been brutal, and I just wonder, what is this going to show people? And it leads to the inevitable question, is Uber safe?
So look, I will be completely honest with you. The decision to publish a transparency report, a safety transparency report, was a hard decision. It's not one that we were being forced to do because of any litigation. There's no law in the book that forces us to do it. But the reason we thought that was important is because if we say that safety is a core value, and it's the way that we're going to measure our business success, which is what we have said, Dara has said it, I've said it, then we have to make sure we're holding ourselves publicly accountable to that. And so, you know, one of the things we've said over and over again, I've said over and over again, is we want to make the platform the safest platform it can possibly be. We want to particularly increase the safety of the platform for women because we believe that if you do that, you will make it safer for everyone. The New York Times has actually done a lot of work on looking at how women experience travel differently and how they face safety challenges that men just don't face. And so if you raise the bar and you kind of focus on raising the safety bar there, you're going to make it safer for everybody. And so that means being very forward-leaning, particularly on issues of sexual assault, sexual harassment that occur on the platform. You know, we do 16 million rides a day on our platform, which means that the 1 in a million thing happens to us 16 times a day, right? And that means that there are some bad things that happen on the platform. So the question is, how can you begin to be transparent about that fact? How can you then share that information and hopefully identify best practices that will allow you not only to mitigate bad things that happen, but prevent bad things from happening? And that's really the idea behind, behind the transparency report. And we made that decision to also work with over 100 women's organizations and sexual violence, anti-sexual violence advocacy organizations to help inform how we come to that decision, how we publish those numbers, how we talk about that. Because the other thing that we know will happen is that, as most people know, this is a terribly underreported set of offenses, sexual assault, sexual violence. And if we make it clear that we are paying attention and we make it clear that we are willing to act when we publish these things, what will happen, hopefully, is reporting will go up. Yeah. And while that won't be a great news day for me, the reality is that will be better because people will know that we want those reports to go up because we want to know what's really happening on the platform so we can do something about it.
Yeah, so this is an Uber that is committed to transparency, it seems, an Uber that's working with surprising allies, perhaps, and one that also you're working now with the SEIU and labor groups to figure out how to navigate your way around this Dynamex ruling in California. And without getting too much in the weeds, this is a ruling that could classify your drivers, who are not technically employees, as employees. If Uber is entering this new phase where you've talked about wanting to be a good corporate actor, what concessions are you willing to make to drivers?
So look, there's this tension that's been going on for the last 10 years about whether or not drivers are independent contractors or employees. And if you speak to drivers, the next time you're in an Uber, just sort of ask your driver, what's the thing they like most about driving for Uber? They'll tell you a lot of things they probably don't like, and I hear it a lot because I always ask. But one of the things that I consistently hear is they like the flexibility. I can work when I want. I can work how I want. I decide, whether or not to drive. No one tells me to do that. And so the trick is, or the challenge is, how do you maintain that flexibility and that comes with independent work while also making sure that is quality work, it's work with dignity, it is work that has security, right? That you shouldn't have to make this false choice between benefits that make me more secure and whether or not I want to have flexible work. That's a hard problem because that's not the legal framework we live in. And so what we have been doing is we've been reaching out to stakeholders, including labor, to try to see how do we actually create a framework that works for the gig economy, and one that is actually a way in which people can come to the gig economy, can do independent work. That work can be work that is both meaningful and is also one that pays them a living wage. And so we've made commitments on driver earnings. It's why we supported the driver earnings ordinance here in New York. And we believe that there ought to be transparency and a standard around earnings. We believe in portable benefits, and which is why we consistently have supported that and have actually done that in Europe, have created portable benefits for our drivers. And we believe in drivers being able to have a voice, some type of representative voice in the corporate environment. And so those are all things that we've said we're committed to. And hopefully we can get to a solution that actually works for the 21st century.
We'll see. You have the unique position of having been at Justice and now being in Silicon Valley. We're at a moment right now where there is a real gathering storm for tech companies, real serious antitrust look coming down from multiple branches. Is this warranted, and how do you feel at Uber being a dominant player among these? Right now the focus is less on you, but it's not hard to see it getting there pretty swiftly.
I'm just glad they're not talking about us in the same breath these days. Look, is it warranted? Yeah, I actually do think it's kind of warranted. When you just kind of look at the history of how tech has developed, a lot of this is the result of self-inflicted wounds. So I do think some of it is warranted. And that scrutiny is tech went through a long period of a great honeymoon, and now it's having to grapple with the fact that it is a constant force in our lives.
What specifically?
Well, it's not just size, I think, but the way in which data in particularly is used. So for a long time, I think there was a meme that tech would use data. As long as you consented to it, it was okay for them to use, you check that little box in order to use the app, then they could use your data in any way. And I think what has changed is that's not enough. Consent is not enough. You have to, if you're going to ask people to trust you with their data, you have to use that data in ways that users expect, that meet their expectations, not just the consent box. Thinking about it in that way is something that's still relatively new, but I think it's necessary if frankly, we're going to be able to, as a community, as a tech community, meet both the responsibility and have the benefits that come with being such an important part of the American economy and the American society.
I'm sure should the lens of Washington ever fall squarely on you, regulators will appreciate your self-reflection.
Well, look. Let me tell you, my first day on the job, literally my first day, was we announced our data breach in 2016. So most folks are like, figuring out where the bathroom is and meeting their colleagues and getting their desk. I was calling up 50 state AGs saying, hi, I'm Tony, I'm new on the job, I have something I have to tell you. Now, look, I think they did appreciate that because we resolved that with all 50 state AGs in a record time in less than 10 months. But, again, it's important to show people, not just say these are important values, but to show by doing.
Yeah. Lastly, my colleague Mike Isaac has a book coming out in September.
I've heard that.
Super pumped, The Battle for Uber. Are you looking forward to reading it?
I'm sure it'll be a very good history.
But hopefully not the present. Tony West,
right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Please welcome to the stage New York Times